first things first is that you want to be able to communicate what you're going through without fear that you're going to be, whether it's, disciplined or that you might lose your job.
Hello, I'm Vicki Townsend, and I'm the president and founder of Divorce Right. We are a company that finally brings a solution for divorce in your company. We understand the incredible impact it has on both your culture and on your bottom line. So welcome to our podcast, Divorce Right, HR Solutions for Divorce in the Workplace. And today our topic is chronic illness and divorce. Today we're speaking with LaQuita Fergerson. She is a certified divorce, transition, and recovery coach specializing in identity crisis and chronic illness. She believes in engaging the mind, body, and spirit for a whole body transformation. Through introspection, creativity, personalized strengths assessment, and neuro-linguistic programming, LaQuita creates a safe zone to release negative emotions and embrace your authentic identity while building resilience, gaining clarity, confidence, and courage. She is both approachable and available to provide coaching and customized training specifically tailored to members of the National Multiple Sclerosis Society, fire safety, and the Christian communities. Welcome, LaQuita. We are so happy to have you here today because this is a very, very important conversation.
Yes, it is. And thank you for having me. This is definitely, all of these topics are very near and dear to my heart.
Absolutely. And LaQuita, you were diagnosed in 2010 with multiple sclerosis, and it in fact impacted your marriage. So why don't you tell us about the emotional impacts of a chronic illness diagnosis on divorce?
Sure. Yeah. So my diagnosis came, and like I said, it was diagnosed in 2010, but there was a series about 2 years where I was having symptoms that the doctors could not identify with. So that was definitely putting a strain on the marriage. There's one statistic that states that a chronic illness will affect or increase the risk of divorce by 45 up to 75%. And so when you think about what your body is undergoing, what your mind is undergoing, that transition, that acceptance that it takes to realize that your life has changed, and how that impacts the marriage. For me personally, I can say that emotionally, I became even more detached than I already had been, because I went into trying to take care of myself, and it was very frightening. And so what it does, not only for the person that's being diagnosed, but then the mate, goes into caregiver mode. And if they're not prepared for that emotionally and mentally, it definitely puts a strain on marriage.
Oh, absolutely. That's some really scary statistics about that. And we don't think about, one of our issues and the things that we are so proud to support are families with special needs loved ones. And typically those special needs loved ones that people think about are their children. Maybe it's
Right.
autism or cerebral palsy or some other devastating illness, disease, or accident that the child faces. And I don't think we really talk a lot about special needs as adults in the marriage, whether it's from multiple sclerosis or a stroke or a car accident or cancer, any of these things that that impacts the stability of their marriage, like the diagnosis that you were diagnosed with. And so how did that affect, how do you feel like that affected you in the workplace?
Oh, well, one of the things with multiple sclerosis, that it already affects your cognitive function. And so brain fog is definitely something that I struggled with. I was working in the accounting industry, which definitely requires me to be attentive and to pay attention to detail. And I noticed that suddenly I just couldn't even focus on things that used to be, second nature to me. And so then there's a frustration, why can't I remember this, or why can't I seem to focus the way that I used to, and learning to adapt to what even I expected of myself, but also the shame of communicating that, with management, and knowing that it may, or feeling that it may affect the way that I'm dealt with, as an employee or as a team lead, which I was at the time. just knowing that I'm going to affect other people's workload. So there's definitely a burden, a little, little bit of shame that comes with that and being able to adapt. And it also affected my tardiness. I was one that was always on time, but suddenly I couldn't sleep at night. And so then I couldn't wake up on time in the morning, and I'm rushing to get to work. And now suddenly, and it becomes a domino effect, because you're late and now your management is looking at you like, what's going on? But I'm afraid to communicate really what's going on. And it just created even more of a stressful environment.
Right. I can imagine. And to your point, you don't even think, a side effect of that is lack of sleep, and lack of sleep manifests itself into your productivity with mistakes, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Right. And if you're in accounting, you can't have mistakes, can you?
No. So that, just increased error, reducing the concentration, sometimes even making poor decisions and having to own up to that, because I'm distracted, just with the chronic illness. And at a couple of years after that, and I separated from my spouse. And so there's a distraction on top of distraction, in the workplace.
Exactly, because now you've got to deal with the fact that your body and your mind is not behaving as it used to. And now you're going through adding another unbelievably stressful, complicated event in your life on top of all of those other things. So, where do you draw the line, and more importantly, like, how can corporations, what can they do to kind of mitigate or alleviate that impact for you?
Well, I would say the most important thing is to create a safe and positive culture where that door is open to communicate with HR, with management. I mean, first things first is that you want to be able to communicate what you're going through without fear that you're going to be, whether it's, disciplined, or that you might lose your job, or that the environment won't be safe anymore. And so having that open door with management and HR would definitely help to mitigate that, providing resources and support that there will be privacy and confidentiality as I'm discussing what I'm going through. And also even allowing for the flexible work schedules, their personal leave policies that are in place. One thing about a chronic illness is that it causes a severe strain in your daily routine, as I mentioned, and within the relationship. And so the severity of the illness can be exacerbated, which will cause work limitations and even limit socializing. You may not be cognitively able to communicate with your team the way that you used to, because you're managing so much and your mind and body is so disconnected. So that would definitely be that safe environment that the corporations could start to mitigate. But then also, one thing that I recognize in hindsight where I lack was emotional intelligence. And when corporations have and they facilitate emotional intelligence in the workplace, it has a long-lasting benefit. Having the self-awareness to even acknowledge where I was in the transition, in the emotional roller coaster, in dealing with the chronic illness as well as divorce at the same time. Initially, there's a shock, there's a denial and anger. And then as you try to deal with those emotions, then there's an anxiety and a resistance, and you're confused, and you have all this, up and down on a daily basis. And so just knowing where you are in the transition is definitely important. Knowing that you're doing your best, even under the stressful environment, it helps you to adapt and have a positive outlook. And as I mentioned before, I was a team leader. So it was important for me to recognize that and have empathy on my team, that they are being impacted by the decisions or the lack of decisions that I am making, and allowing myself to be vulnerable. There's inspiration and connection that comes from being vulnerable, even in the workplace, communicating with the necessary parties and apprising them of anything that will require additional support and cooperation on their end, and understanding that, you're going through a divorce, but your way of being influences others. being able to manage conflict, having that teamwork, and having a coach or a mentor in the workplace.
Interesting. So we are all about supporting employees as they go through a divorce in the workplace. So on top of adding to that complexity, as we talked about earlier, for your multiple sclerosis diagnosis, what would the benefit of divorce coaching be for you and for the corporation itself?
Well, one thing that people may not know is that certified divorce coaches, which I am certified divorce coach, we go through extensive training, and they're actually recognized by the American Bar Association as a dispute resolution alternative. They recognize that divorce coaching is flexible, it's goal-oriented, and it's designed to support, motivate, and guide people through divorce to help them make the best possible decisions for their future. And these are all transferable skill sets, communicating, being able to manage conflict, goal-oriented. It's really a win-win for corporations. I think another statistic that I can mention is that the emotional strain affects corporations up to $75 billion a year, because management teams, we're all distracted. We're all, everyone is affected by a person's personal life, especially something as so severe as divorce. And so divorce coaching really helps to help that divorcing employee go through, or have, when they're going through such a high stressful life change as divorce, it helps them to navigate their emotions, to resolve disputes in a way that affects or impacts the bottom line of the corporation.
Absolutely, absolutely. And to have somebody that can just hold your hand through the process is an amazing support system in itself. And then when you bring in the areas of expertise, like yours, somebody that has been diagnosed with a significant illness like yours, I mean, having somebody that understands that, I think in this process is really important. And I appreciate you being vulnerable with us today. So I want to wrap this up with some of your takeaways and advice for HR professionals and leaders that what can they take back to the office from your perspective that would impact their employees?
Well, I like to deal in acronyms. So creating an acronym, which is your EI, or Emotional Intelligence Score. And the score stands for the safe environment, communication that supports the organizational goals and relationships. All of that can be achieved by experts, having the right experts. And divorce coaching really is a win-win. As I mentioned earlier, having the transferable skills that help to improve the bottom line of the corporation. They won't lose out on a really good employee, because a lot of times it's not that, a person divorcing becomes a liability because of they're not being a good employee. They don't have the support system that they need to navigate such a stressful situation.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being with us today. This is a very important conversation. Are there any statistics, and I'm pulling this on you, but are there any statistics with chronic illness, like percentage of the population that actually experience a chronic illness like MS or?
That is a very good statistic. I don't have it off the top of my head, but I can tell you that when I was diagnosed and I attended my first national MS meeting, there was about 75% of us in there that had been diagnosed within 6 months surrounding our divorce.
Oh, interesting.
And so that was here in the Detroit area.
Wow, interesting, very interesting. Yeah, so it definitely impacts so many. So thank you for being, like I said, just so vulnerable with us today, and I appreciate you. And I wanted to just remind all of you that are listening today that we are here as a solution to divorce in your workplace, we have experts just like LaQuita, and we're so proud to have her with us today and always. So thank you so much, and we hope that you will join us again as we discuss HR solutions for divorce in the workplace. Thank you so much for being with us today, LaQuita, and we will all
Thank
see you
you.
next week. Bye for now.